Welcome to our first podcast. My name is Nicholas Coriano. I have my partner with me, Dan Wachtel. We're going to be talking about all things finance, a lot about penny stocks, a lot about micro-cap stocks because our audience definitely wants to hear about it, and we definitely have experience in the small-cap, micro-cap sector as well as the public company sectors via our firms at Servitude and Harbor Capital. So without further ado, I'm going to let this podcast be an introduction to us. We're going to film this. We're going to put this on YouTube, guys. We're going to put this on iTunes. So if you're listening in, you guys can also watch it on YouTube. And we'll be sharing this some other places. But for this podcast, we're going to do introductions. So, Dan, you want to do the honors of going first?
Sure, yeah. I started back in the financial markets in 2005 as an intern at Bear Stearns, and once Bear Stearns started to collapse, I moved to Oppenheimer Funds and was an analyst and advisor there. And then I moved on to the hedge fund and investment banking world, and did a couple of years doing advisory at Morgan Stanley and Merrill Lynch, and then started Harbor Capital, and I met Nick a few months ago now, and we became partners at Servitude.
That's it. And a little background on me. I've loved the stock market since I was a kid, as I'm sure Dan forgot to mention himself. We talked about this a lot. Love the stock market. Played my first stock market game in 8th grade. Went to business school, University of Connecticut. Worked at Merrill Lynch. Worked at the New York Stock Exchange in their insider trading division. At Merrill Lynch, I worked in private wealth management. Went to law school, the John Marshall Law School in Chicago, studied some securities law there and intellectual property law. Graduated there, went to work at an investor relations firm where I learned a lot about the OTC markets, the microcap sector, NASDAQ, smaller publicly traded companies, New York Stock Exchange publicly traded companies. And then I started my own firm at Servitude back in 2011. I actually started Servitude before taking on that job after law school. So that's a little background on me. We really started this podcast. Me and Dan talked about this podcast, and we were having regular conversations with ourselves about the micro-cap sector and penny stocks. And we said to ourselves, man, this would be a great podcast for people because we were so clear cut and raw. If you're watching us on YouTube right now, we have ties on, but some of our conversations on the phone, they're raw. So that's what we want to give you guys is a raw experience on the microcap sector. Tell you guys from an insider's perspective what it is. So let's start, after this brief introduction, we're going to start let's define what a microcap and a penny stock is. So regular conversation flow here. We're going to look up some stuff on the computer for you guys, but a lot of it's going to come from experience from me and Dan. So, Dan, you want to tackle that first question? I'll tackle the penny stock question. Legally, a penny stock, defined by securities law, is a stock under $5, which is surprising to some people because you say penny stock, right? And right away you think, well, it has to be worth a penny. But the legal definition, the Securities and Exchange Commission agrees obviously with the laws, and the laws say that under $5. Now, microcap's a little different, right? Because that goes by capitalization, right, Dan?
Yeah, microcap, I believe, is anything under, what is it?
Yeah, I've seen some varying definitions of this. I've seen varying definitions. Some people say it's under 500 million. I think Wikipedia puts it under 300 million. I've seen guys that state microcap, and we're talking about microcap stocks, and what we're talking about is the capitalization. So market cap capitalization, and market capitalization is how many stocks outstanding times the stock price. So it's the value of the whole company if you wanted to buy all the shares outstanding today. And yeah, I think that's where you're coming with a hiccup, right? Because I've seen a couple definitions of this. I've seen 500 be the range. Ian Castle on Microcap Club defines it as 500. The Dreyfus Microcap group of hedge funds and ETFs, I think, is 500. That's their classification. But you go on Wiki, it's 300 million market cap.
I know the low is 50 million. Anything under 50.
Okay, so now I've seen for those guys listening saying 50 million market cap is the low for a micro cap stock, and I've seen them classify even further split up the definition of a micro cap stock into nano cap stocks, and I've seen that where they're under 50 or under 100. Again, it really depends on what bank you're at, what investment bank you're at, and what the definition. But generally, that's the range. They're generally under 500 million, right? Market cap. When you're talking about micro cap stocks. Now, penny stocks, the layman's term is just pennies, right? As long as it's under 99 cents, it's a penny stock, but the legal definition is under $5. So that's the basic core definition. What else do you want to give them, Dan, about the basics of defining a penny stock and I guess where they trade, right?
Well, you can find penny stocks anywhere. I mean, most of the time you can find them on the NASDAQ, the New York Stock Exchange, the London Exchange. Most of them that you're going to find on the OTC markets. But that's just because that's where they live all the time. And that's where you're going to find those penny stocks. However, you're going to find great companies that are under $5. It's just the way the market is. It's efficient until it's not efficient. And once the inefficiency comes in, you can see that the market starts to take down great companies due to the fact that they don't believe that they're going to grow, or they were a growth story and now they become more of a value story. And once you get into that penny stock area, the under $5 area, a lot of people start to come in to buy because they think it's cheap. Well, that's not necessarily the case. And
yeah, price doesn't equate to value, right? So buying a stock because it's 50 cents doesn't mean it's a good bargain.
No, absolutely right. You can buy a stock that's $100 and a stock that is $5, and the $100 stock is actually going to be cheaper fundamentally than the $5 stock. It's just the way you have to, when you're looking at stocks, you have to realize that you're just buying a piece of a company, that the price is dictated by supply and demand and what people believe the future of that company is where it's going. So you can have bad news come out, a couple bad quarters, and they may bring down the price under $5. But you may have a decent company that is just starting to grow, and what they would call growth stock that has a lot of momentum on the upside, that's growing quickly. Think of Facebook when it first came out, and now, think of Amazon. They're your growth stocks that continually grow quarter after quarter. They're the type of stocks that people will always buy, no matter what, until they stop growing, and then they turn into your more of your laggards, your very large
Value,
value stocks, where a certain set of investors who are long term, they come in and they buy them at a certain.
So let's rewind back to penny stocks to end this podcast, because we're going to keep these podcasts short so you guys can listen to them back to back to back, or whenever you guys want. So I'm going to give you my one tip, and I'll have Dan think about this while I give mine. What my one tip on penny stocks is: be careful. Be careful, guys. This is something that the best of the best get their shirts taken from them. It's something you really have to know the details of. It's not just about buying the company. It's about understanding what the company's management is doing, what their prospects are. Are they going to uplist? What are their plans for fundraising? Is their management vetted at fundraising? Are they looking for a reverse merger? There's so many details in the penny stock sector that you really have to be a lifelong student here to not lose your shirt, because most people are going to lose their shirt. So that's one of my first piece of advice. Dan, you got a quick 15 to 20 second piece of advice?
No, I agree. You really do have to watch when you're dealing with penny stocks. It's the Wild West when it comes to penny stocks. Anything goes. You have to know the management. You have to know what their core strategy is. You have to know where they want to take the company. And if you believe in them, then you should buy the stock. If there's anything that you don't like about it, just move on.
That's great advice. All right. Thanks, guys, for joining another podcast/vlog. We're on iTunes. We're on YouTube. Nicholas Coriano, Daniel Wachtel.